Okay, now we can officially begin. So thank you everyone for joining for our webinar this afternoon. Today's webinar is on decoding the LEAP item record. So the goal for today's webinar is for us to understand how item record settings are more than just for like categorizing records and report. And it's to really help show us how they can impact the patron experience, specifically how these settings can influence circulation, placing holds, and what the patron sees in the online catalog. So this session was designed with the public services staff in mind. So we won't be doing things like editing item records or making bulk changes. So this session is not looking at how to change item records, but instead to give context to what you're looking at when you're in an item record and when you're working with a patron. Additionally, while all parts of the item record can be found in both the staff client desktop application and the LEAP web application, as you could tell from the title, we're just going to be coming at it from LEAP today. And then one other thing too, we're going to focus on physical items over e-content because the physical items, right, those are the ones that you're going to see like the variations of in setting. Those are the items you're gonna be like placing holds on for patrons and checking out to patrons at the desk. So here is a quick look at our agenda. The webinar is being recorded. I will share the recording with everyone who's registered when it's ready. So how I have today structured, we're gonna be looking at slides today. And we'll use those to help kind of learn about what the fields do, the cause and effect. But then we're gonna like break it up with some mini quizzes where you will help me decode an item record together. And one other thing I wanted to show you before we get started. So I just want to kind of give a quick shout out to an upcoming change to the item record in LEAP. So we, in our production, we are currently using Polaris software version 7.2. And you might remember our training database was upgraded to the newer version, to version 7.3 back in October. And one of the changes with 7.3 is an updated LEAP item record layout. So here's a screenshot of the item record layouts. On the left, you'll see what it currently looks like in our 7.2 database. So you are probably right now used to seeing the different settings and fields separated out onto two different tabs, mostly the details tab and the controls tab. But in the next version of Polaris, both of those tabs will be combined into just the details tab. So while we hoped to upgrade to 7.3 before the end of the year, there are some bugs preventing us from doing so at this moment. So it's going to be at least a few more months before you see this combined view in production. So today, we're going to stick with our typical 7.2 layout when we're looking at screenshots, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that this new combined view is coming. So watch for more information in CCS News next year, 2023, for future upgrade. And then in today's session, we will be spending most of our time in those two tabs, right? In the details tab and the controls tab. Some of this information will be displayed up top in the item record header. So I'll also be drawing your eye here every so often. And then there is one spot in the blocks and notes tab that will come up during the section on Power Pack display. So these three areas are kind of where our attention will really be focused today. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the branch settings in an item record. So if you've kind of gone through the controls tab and the details tab, you likely have seen three separate fields related to branches. And yes, each one of those defines something slightly different. So the three branches, one is the owning branch, one is the assigned branch, and then we have the home branch field. Now, for the vast majority of libraries in CCS, these fields will all be pointing towards the same location. If you are part of a multi-branch library, especially one that floats items, you may see different branches in different fields. So what exactly do these three different branches do? So kind of to sum these three locations up, the assign branch, this is likely the one you're most familiar with. It's a common filter when searching or when looking at a report. The assign branch, first of all, tells us which branch currently shelves the item. Like I said, for most libraries, an item is going to live in just one location. But if you're one of those multi-branch libraries that allows items to float between your multiple locations, the assign branch will tell us where that item is currently living. The other thing assign branch does, this also dictates how the item is sorted in the online catalog, which we will see more of later on in the session. Now, if you are that multi-branch library that floats items between collections, the home branch field tells us which branch is like home base for the item. So this just means if the item isn't floating around between locations, the home branch indicates who should have that item. And then finally, the owning branch field controls permissions related to that item, such as who can edit this record. So let's say I have permissions where I can only edit Round Lake items. So this means I can edit item records where the owning branch is set to Round Lake. If I only have Round Lake editing permissions, I could not edit items where the owning branch is set to, say, Evanston Public Library. So those are the three branches in a nutshell. And now we're going to do our first decoding together. So this item record is all over the place. You will never see an item record like this. My first question for you, staff from which library can edit this item? Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to throw it up in chat, I'll give you a second to look at the different branches. Correct. Torrey's is Prospect Heights. That is correct. Prospect Heights is listed as the owning branch. So staff with editing permissions for Prospect Heights could edit this item. Next question. Where does this item currently live? So which
Looks like
branch?
Highland Park.
Correct. Yes. The assigned branch shows us where the item is currently living at. The assigned branch for this one is set to Highland Park. And my first question, where is this item's permanent location? Indian Trails. Excellent. The home branch is Indian Trails. That's like home base for this item. So when it's not floating around, it lives at Indian Trails Public Library. So you guys did great. Hopefully you know a little more now about what those different branch settings do in an item record. Any questions on those before we move on to some circulation related fields? Okay. So the next thing on our agenda is to look at settings that dictate circulation, right? And this here, I'm really talking about what happens at that checkout desk. So the big thing happening here is that most item settings that we're going to look at work together with the user's patron code to determine what circulation rules to apply. And for those in the audience who may not be familiar with the patron code is a field in the user's registration work form. So examples include MBK patron for Northbrook patron, MBK educational, which could be a card for a teacher or a school in the district, and in-house use. In-house use, which is like, a tech services department card. And again, it's the patron code that's going to help us determine what CERC rules to apply at checkout. And the 3 specific rules or questions we're looking at today is how many of a certain type of item can be checked out, how long will the item check out for, and how much will the patron be charged if the item is overdue. So let's take this first question. How many of a certain type of item can the patron have? And here, the item material type is used to answer this question. So this field, to kind of like draw your eye to where you can find it in the item record, this field is currently found in the Controls tab. And the material type is the categories of items like book, book new, or book hot. And like we just established for circulation, this also determines the checkout and the hold limits. So what happens at checkout? When a patron is checking out, Polaris looks at the item's material type, and it then looks at the user's patron code. So it's looking at who is checking out and what are they checking out. It then looks at the tables, those database tables on the back end to find the rules, and it takes action based on that policy. So in our screenshots here, in our example, we have an patron with the code LNK patron checking out with a material type of book. So what's happening here, when that item is checked out, Polaris looks at the rule given for that patron code and that material type together, and they see what the patron's limit is. So in this case, the patron can have up to 150 book items checked out at a time. And that's how Polaris knows whether to allow the checkout or to throw up a material type limit reached block. This is also why we have material types like a regular book, book new, and a book hot, because this allows the library to set different checkout or hold limits based on what type of material it is. So that's how we determine how many. Our next circulation question is figuring out how long an item will check out for. And this question, as I'm sure many of you can guess already, it's answered by the loan period. So again, this field, to kind of draw your eye to it, is located in the Controls tab of the item record. And you're going to pick up on a pattern here. Just like material type, the loan period works with that patron code to figure out what length of checkout to give the patron. So again, going back to our Lincolnwood patron, our LNK patron, here we've got the LNK patron checking out an item with a loan period of book default. So again, Polaris is going to check those backend tables to see what rules there are. And it sees that this patron code and loan period code together is given a 21-day checkout. So that's how long. And the last question is how much will the patron be charged if the item is overdue? And this is logically determined by the fine code. And here's where you see it in an item record. So it's, again, a pattern that's same as that loan period and material type. It looks at the user's patron code, and then it looks at the fine code assigned to the item to figure out the charge. So in our example here, my user with the code LNK patron is checking out this item that we're looking at. It's got the fine code of book. And if that item is overdue, looking how that is defined on our back end, the rule is set so this patron would not be charged fees. Most of us are fine free, so most of our entries are going to have this $0 value in there. Now, you know, I know some libraries out there will charge for like those higher value equipment type. So let's look at a different example here. Something with a fine code of AV equipment. So if the same L&K patron user checks out an item with a fine code of AV equipment, they'll be charged $1 a day because that's what's set on our backend here. So you may be asking why loan periods and fine codes are descriptive rather than give an actual value, right? Rather, why they say book rather than say 21 days. There is a reason for this. So in a consortium, items travel back and forth between libraries, and libraries each have their own, they each have different policies. Our setup allows the transacting or the checkout library to apply their local rules. So here this is kind of illustrated. So here we have a DVD that's traveling around on intra-CCS loan. So patrons from different libraries have placed holds and are checking the item out. So the item has a loan period code of video default. When it gets to the first library, the first library's checkout policies say that DVDs go out for 1 week. So even though this item came from a different library, when it's at library number 1, it's going to check out for 1 week. The next couple of libraries it travels to have different policies. So their libraries, or I'm sorry, their DVDs generally check out for 2 weeks. So because they're able to define video default as 14 days, they're still able to apply their standard loan period to this item. So because the item will, oh gosh, I'm sorry, I think I skipped ahead way too fast here. It's the same thing with fine codes, right? One library is fine free, another charges fines. So this way, like a library that has a fine code of book doesn't have to charge fines because they're fine free. If it travels to a location that charges fines, that item will still apply fees to the patron's account. I hope that makes sense. I hope that helps to illustrate it. So in a nutshell, like everyone shares the code, but each branch can decide how that code is defined. Now, I will say one of the challenges of using this setup is that it's not visually apparent in the item record how much or how long things check out for at your location. And I just want to highlight a report here. You can find how your library defines these codes in a web report called Polaris Policies. It runs daily, so it's always up to date, no matter if you like adjust a policy. There are different tabs in this report that will summarize how you define your loan periods, your fine codes, and those material type checkout limits. If you've looked at this report, so you'll know that it's more of a summary rather than a complete copy paste of the tables. And that's because those backend tables, they are big. So there's each branch has over 9,200 lines just for loan periods. Each branch has about 13,000 lines for material type checkout limit. So instead of giving you each line of each table, what this report does is it tries to condense and summarize to give you the most common limit, and then it pulls out any outlier limits. So in the screenshot here, we're looking at a snippet of Algonquin's loan period tab in the report. And here, if I can draw your attention to the book default, Looking at loan period book default, most patron codes get 21 days, right? They're kind of condensed under this all or all other patron codes. But a couple other patron codes, ILL library and in-house use, they get extended loans. And so the report will call out those different values. Are you guys ready to decode a few more items? So here I have a screenshot of an item record and some lines from a Polaris Policies web report. So we're going to use both of these together to decode the item's behavior. So the first question for you is, we've got a user with a patron code ALK patron checking out at Algonquin Area Public Library. So this snapshot here of the report is, this is a little bit of Algonquin's policy report here. So my first question for you is, how long will this item, this playaway, check out for? And to get you started, you'll want to find the loan period code in the item record, and then check how the library defines that using the policy report. I've got some answers coming through. 35 days. Yes. So we see that the loan period is audiobook long. We've got a user with ALK patron checking out. So looking at the report, we see audiobook long for most users is defined at 35 days. Okay, I have a feeling you're going to find this answer easily. Same item, but this time someone with a patron code in-house use is checking this item out. How long will this one check out for now? $180. Excellent. Yep, because this is same item, so we're still working with audiobook long loan period. But this time it's an in-house patron, and we know they get a different checkout period because they are one of those like called out outlier values. Okay, let's say this playaway goes out on interest CCS loan. It's now headed to Evanston for a hold. So you've got a user with patron code EVK patron checking this playaway out at Evanston Public Library. So now, because it's checking out Evanston, we're no longer looking at Algonquin's policy report. So now we're looking at a screenshot of Evanston's report. How long is this item going to check out for at Evanston Public Library? 28 days, yes. We've got the same period, audiobook long, but this time, because it's traveling, and we get to apply Evanston's policies, which says 28 days for audiobook long. Okay, we're going to switch gears to fines. So we're now moving on to Park Ridge Public Library to check out. We have a user with patron code PRK patron checking out a GoPro gooseneck clamp at Park Ridge Public Library. How much will a user with patron code PRK patron be charged per day if this item is overdue? Got some answers coming through. $5, correct. We got our fine code, Steam equipment, patron code PRK patron, check that report. Most patron codes get a $5. Now, a different user comes to Park Ridge and checks this item out. How much will a user with patron code NIK patron be charged if the item is overdue? Yes, they will still be charged $5. Correct. Because they are not one of those called out, even though they came from a different library, they are not one of those called out values. They grouped under all or all other patron codes. And final question for this one, if a user with patron code PRK homebound has this item checked out from Park Ridge, how much will they be charged? And 0. I love all these questions coming in. You guys are so great. Correct. This is one of those called out values. They are defined at a different rate. So To summarize again, material type, loan period, and fine code are applied based on the checkout or the transacting library. But there are a few values that are set by the owning library that follow the item no matter where it goes. Um, One of those is the renewal limit. So the renewal limit, this is also found in the controls tab. And the renewal limit is set by the item library. So the items library sets how many times this item can be renewed, and that value follows the item no matter where it's going. Now, it is CCS policy that any item eligible for intra-CCS loan has to be renewable at least twice, but libraries can set a higher value. Um, so keep this in mind. If you're working with a patron, and let's say like you're a library that typically assigns like 4 renewals to an item. And if you have a patron that's like, ooh, so they are surprised that something didn't renew along with their other items, one thing to check, did this item come from a different library? And if so, like it could have a different renewal limit assigned than what you typically give your items. So the renewal limit set by the items library, that value follows the item no matter where it goes. Another value that follows the item is the cost, the price of the item. And this includes both the price of the item and the processing fee. So you'll see the price of the item listed in the item header. The field also appears in the details tab. So if the item becomes lost and it's billed to the repatron, this is the replacement cost that's going to be applied. And then additionally, the items library determines whether a processing fee will also be applied. Okay, so that's what I have for circulations. Any questions on circulation and item fields before we go on to hold settings? Does the fee show anywhere but billing? You can't really tell if a processing fee is going to be applied from the item record. We do have a page on our website that lists the libraries, it's a list of CCS libraries, and it will say if the library charges a processing fee, and if so, what that fee is, or if it doesn't. Okay, yeah, it would be nice if it was a little more visible. If you think of anything else with circulation, don't hesitate to ask those. The next group of settings I went in to dive into relate to holds, and I'd say these are kind of my favorite settings. The items hold behavior, and by this I mean like, can it be held, and who is eligible for this item? This is all set in the items records controls tab. So if you scroll down to the bottom of that tab, in the last section of that tab, you'll see this series of checkbox settings here. So the first thing I just want to quickly explain what like those first 2 checkbox settings are on the upper left. And I will say, one of the most common hold questions I get is like along the lines of like, what exactly is this loanable outside the system checkbox do? And the short answer is, for us right now, nothing. So this checkbox is tied to an out of system interlibrary loan. So like, anything outside of CCS, an out of system interlibrary loan integration called InReach. And CCS libraries do not currently participate in InReach. And since we don't use that integration, this checkbox setting essentially has no impact on the item. However, with that being said, the best practice is still to set this checkbox up because maybe someday that integration will become relevant to us, or maybe there's like new functionality that's added to Polaris that references this checkbox. So if we set this checkbox appropriately now, we can save significant record cleanup time in the future. So even though this checkbox doesn't do anything to the item, if that item is eligible to be loaned out on out-of-system interlibrary loan, best practice is to have that checkbox selected, like in the screenshot here. If the item isn't eligible to go out on out-of-system interlibrary loan, the checkbox should not be selected. So like I said, it does not have an impact on us right now. It could in the future. We never know. The other checkbox setting you see here is a do not mail to patron setting. And this relates to what's called borrow by mail functionality. Out of the CCS libraries, Algonquin is the only library that offers borrow by mail. And this is a service where if the patron wants, the library will mail eligible items to those patrons instead of holding them at the library. So because Algonquin is the only library that uses borrow by mail, or that offers borrow by mail, um, they are the only library whose items are eligible. So that is why for all other CCS libraries, this checkbox should be set to do not mail to patron. Just Algonquin items are eligible to be mailed. So with those out of the way, let's look at the main hold settings. And the setting to rule them all is this holdable checkbox. So this checkbox determines if the item is eligible to be held or if it's non-holdable. So if it's selected, the item can be held. If it's deselected, the item is non-holdable, and this means that no one will be able to hold the item. And then if the item is holdable, the library has additional settings available under these hold limited to options. So let's look at these. We're going to go through each one. Excuse me. I will show you some examples of what you can see and what they mean for the item. And I have to cough, so I'm just going to mute myself real fast. Okay, thank you. So the first thing, we just going to look at this. This setup here, where the only checkbox that's selected is this holdable checkbox, and none of the limited to settings are selected, right? So this entire panel here is blank. This setup tells us that the item is eligible to fill holds, and there are no other restrictions on the item. So this item can fill a hold for any patron at any location. The checkbox, the next checkbox I want to draw your eye to is the checkbox labeled patrons from this library and branches. And this indicates that the item will only fill holds to users registered to the same library as the item. So if the item is assigned to Northbrook, it will only fill holds for Northbrook patrons. If the item is assigned to Palatine, Maine, it will fill holds for patrons registered to any of the Palatine branches, right? So this includes Palatine, Maine, the Rand Road branch, and the North Hoffman branch. Additionally, there is kind of like a subsetting here. The days past first available checkbox. So if the days past first available checkbox is selected, this tells us that the item will be limited to local patrons, but only for just a limited time, just for a set amount of time. And you'll typically see this setting with new items, right? The item, once it is released, it will only be limited to those local patrons just for a certain period, and then it will open up and fill anyone's holds. This setting, to calculate that period, this setting uses the item's first available date. And the first available date is the date the item went into circulation. So the date it was first available to be checked out. I'm just going to check my chat. Does this setting look at the assigned branch field? It does. So what this setting does, if this setting is selected, and let's say this item is brand new, so within the first 90 days, it's going to look at the who's placing that hold. And if that patron is from the same branch as the item, it will fill the hold. The item will trap for a hold for the patron. If the user is from a different library, the user will still place a hold, but the item just won't fill it until those 90 days are up. So for those first 90 days, it's just prioritizing those patrons based on the, like you said, Natalia, based on the assigned branch. Oh, I'm sorry, versus owning branch or home branch. Yes, so it does look at assigned branch. And with this checkbox here, patrons from this library and branches, it looks at, it considers all branches under that library umbrella. I hope that if I still didn't answer the question, definitely let me know. So let's take a look at a screenshot here. So in this, for this item, the holdable checkbox is selected. So we know this item is holdable. The patrons from this library and branches checkbox is also selected. And this tells us the item will only fill holds for local patrons. However, the days past first available checkbox that is also selected, which means this item is only temporarily limited to local patrons for a value of 90 days. After that 90-day period, the item will become eligible to fulfill holds for anyone. And what's nice about this, during this 90-day period, staff and patrons can continue to place holds from any library. This item just won't consider those non-local holds until the 90-day period is up. And conversely, so here's another screenshot kind of contrasting with that. So here we have an item that is holdable. Oh, good question. Does the checkbox disappear after 90 days? Yes. This checkbox does not need additional staff intervention. So staff don't have to go in and do a bulk change to remove it after 90 days. So here's another item. We have a holdable item, right? Our checkbox for holdable is selected. Again, the patrons from this library and branches checkbox is also selected. So we know the item will only fill holds for local patrons. But here, the item does not have days past first available checkbox selected. So there's no expiration date on local patrons only. So this item will only fill local holds, period. You'll typically see this kind of setup with specialty, special or specialty materials like mobile hotspots or big pieces of equipment. And then finally, another limit option you may encounter is this pickup at checkbox. This setting limits where the item can be picked up at. So if this checkbox is not selected, the item can travel for a hold to any library. If this checkbox is selected, the item is only eligible to fill holds with a pickup location of the branch that's listed. So in this screenshot here, the item will only fill holds if the pickup location is at Gray's Lake. This setting should be used with items that cannot be safely sent in transit through delivery. Typically, you'll see things like large activity kits, or again, like those really expensive pieces of equipment. So we're going to check on a few item records together first. So here we have a Huntley item. This item is holdable. It's limited to patrons from this library at branches, plus it's limited to a pickup location of Huntley. Now with this setup, the item will only fill holds for Huntley patrons who have a pickup location of Huntley. This means that if a Huntley patron places a hold for a pickup at a neighboring library, like if they place a hold for pickup at Algonquin, this item will not fill that hold. Why? Because even though it's still a local patron, it's only going to fill holds with a pickup location of Huntley, right? So when we're like decoding these, when we're decoding these items, we're just kind of like stacking the settings on top of one another to figure out the behavior of the item. Okay, I'm gonna let you decode this one. So I've got a series of questions here. First of all, is this item holdable? I see those yeses coming through. Excellent. Our holdable checkbox is selected. We know the item is holdable. Next question. Who can play, like who is eligible for this hold? Perfect. Anyone, yes. Anyone is eligible for this hold. This item is not limited to any certain library or branch. Now, will this item be sent on delivery? Nope, you got it. A pickup only at Lake Forest Library. No, we are mean. I'm glad I've got some Lake Forest representation in the audience. Okay, last question for this particular item. Will this item fill a hold for a Glencoe patron with a pickup location of Lake Forest? Excellent, correct, yes. Anyone can place a hold as long as they've got a pickup location of Lake Forest Library. I'm a Glencoe patron, I can still place that hold. Okay, I have an item record here, item record from Zion Benton. This is for a title that has not been released yet, so no copies are available for circulation. On release day, will this item fill a hold for a Wilmette patron that first day it's available? No, correct. It's going to be limited to patrons from this library and branches. How long until the item is eligible to fill the Wilmette patron hold? Yes, 90 days. So once it's going to be limited to local patrons for 90 days, after 90 days, it will fill anyone's hold. Okay, a Zion Benton patron places a hold for pickup at Fremont. Will this item fill that hold? This is I'll give you another second to think about it. Yeah, this is kind of, so here's the thing. This is kind of a trick question. I've got a Zion Benton patron, pick up at Fremont Library. So it's a Zion Benton item, Zion Benton patron. They're local, right? They can place a hold. This item is not limited to any certain pickup location. So as long as it's a Zion Benton patron, this item will travel. I hope that makes sense. I try to make that one a tricky one. You got it. Yes. So how are you feeling about hold settings at this time? There's a lot of check boxes there. Okay, good. Good. Um, y'all answered those questions very, very well. There are two other check boxes here. This area probably aren't going to see any use, so I just really quickly wanted to go through them. The first one is patrons from this branch only checkbox. This checkbox will only allow the item to fill a hold for patrons registered to that exact branch. So, before we were talking about Palatine, if the item has a branch of Palatine Rand Road, if this checkbox is selected, it will not fill a hold for a patron registered to Palatine Main, right? Different branches. So in order to prevent issues with multi-branch libraries, that's why we use this top setting here, patrons from this library and branches. And then next checkbox setting, it's a little confusing if I'm honest. It's a checkbox that says preferred borrowers. However, the only preferred borrower you can define is like an entire library. So I can say, my preferred borrowers are like Highland Park, Glencoe, and Lake Forest. And the item will only fill a hold if the patron is from one of those libraries. So it doesn't allow us to kind of get as granular as sometimes we need to go. I think this setting was meant to be used if you had like a cohort within a shared catalog. And in CCS, we just don't have those kinds of subgroupings. So again, this is a checkbox that you're not going to see. So we're going to wrap up today talking about fields that impact display, particularly in the Power Pack. So to give you a reference point, here's a snapshot of the pack when the patron is looking at our holdings. So here we're going to do like some reverse decoding. We're going to take what the patron sees and figure out what item fields are represented in the display. So to start with, Polaris records have a display in pack checkbox. And this gives libraries flexibility if they want to show an item or shadow an item. So if you see a record in the pack, you right away know that the display in pack checkbox is selected. If it's not checked, patrons won't see the holding in the online catalog. Now, another thing that can impact display is the circulation status of the item. So there are certain circ statuses that will automatically suppress display of an item in the pack. So if an item is changed to or transitions to a status of lost, meaning it's been billed to the patron, damaged, if it's missing, claimed, or withdrawn, the item will no longer display in the Power Pack. But the nice thing about this is that the circ status does not mess with the display in pack checkbox. So if the item ends up being found or whatever the issue is resolved, it will once again display in the pack without staff needing to do anything extra. So as soon as it's checked in, that circ status is cleared, it will show up in the online catalog again. Earlier, we talked about the different branch fields in an item record. So the assigned branch field, like we said before, determines which location this item displays under in the pack. So any copies that are listed under displays in the pack it has an assigned branch of displays in the item record. Now, collection code. Collection might not be something you normally think about with the pack, but it can also impact how the pack displays. Now there's where you can see collection in the item record. Collection doesn't have an impact on like circulation or checkout limits. For us, for staff, we're used to collections. We're, um, we normally encounter collections mostly when we do like statistics and reporting. But for patrons, they also see this field in the pack. So when you're looking at the list of holdings for a title, the collection kind of appears like right under that branch level, right? So you've got fiction and teen fiction. Now, for most titles, this isn't going to have much visual impact. However, sometimes you have crossover titles like this, you can't really see here, but this is screenshots from To Kill a Mockingbird. For a title like this, a library could have copies in both like the adult collection and the teen collection. So in this case, someone using the Power Pack will see their holdings grouped first by collection. Um, the next field, call number, this is straightforward, right? In the item record, it's parsed out. Each part can be edited in Leap or the client. And then it displays to patrons unparsed or all together in the Power Pack. This helps us all find where and in what order things are shelved. Next to the call number in the list of holdings, you'll see the shelf location. Like the call number, the shelf location is meant to help both patrons and staff identify where they will find the item. So shelf locations, these are individualized by library. They can vary from broad to very specific. In a lot of cases, they're going to match your library signage and local terminology. So here's a fun one that's in the item record, but not in the pack. Now, when you're in the item record, you'll also see a field for temporary location. This field, if I can put it bluntly, is kind of worthless. This does not display in the pack, like I said. It doesn't display in like the Leap search results list. You can't really search for it. And I have yet to find it appear anywhere as an option in Simply Reports. So, I think, feel like we're forever trying to figure out a use for this field, and we just haven't been able to yet. So I'm putting it out there for you. If your library has a use for this field or figures out a use for this field, we would love to hear about it. And then to the right of the shelf location, you've got your circulation status. And there are two things that's going to impact the status display. First, straightforward, the circ status, right? That's just going to reflect the current state of the item. Is it available? Is it checked out, in transit between libraries? And then if you remember from a few minutes ago, there are certain circulation statuses that you're just not going to see in the Power Pack because those items are suppressed, those lost, missing, withdrawn items. Now, additionally, some libraries use a recently returned status that will display in the pack. So this is an optional setting. Libraries can choose to use it or not to use it. So this is separate from the item record. There's not a field in the item record that's going to show you that the item was recently returned aside from the date timestamp in the item record header. And then finally, I feel like this one doesn't come up as much. There's one more item field that can impact the pack display. It's in a different location than the Details and Controls tab. We're finally at the Blocks and Notes tab. It is the Public Note field. So these notes do appear in the pack. When you're looking at a list of holdings, the public note is going to display right under the item's call number. I've seen public notes used for like a few different things. Contents of kits, if it was purchased in honor of someone. So what you see in the note may vary based on the library. Okay, I know we're hitting it. Let's do our final quick decoding quiz. So here we have a screenshot of an item entry in the Power Pack. So this is when we're going to do the reverse decoding. I'm going to ask you what the item record fields are based on this display. So the first question I have, What is this item's assigned branch? Correct. Niles. Yep. It's sorted under Niles main in the pack, so we know it is assigned to Niles. And what is the circulation status of the item record? You got it in transit. Yep. You see the status in transit to another library. That's one of the statuses that displays in the pack. So we know it's like a one-to-one circ status and pack status. And what is the item record collection field set to? Correct, youth fiction. Yep, the item. So remember the collection displays right under the assigned branch. You'll see like youth fiction, youth nonfiction, those collection codes there. Excellent. And is there a public note in this item record? Yes, excellent. There is a note, and we know what the note is. It's level 3 reader. Yep. Okay. Snapshot of an item record in Leap. Will this item display in the Power Pack? No, correct. It will not display in the Power Pack because the circulation status is withdrawn and that will suppress it. Okay, our final one. This item record has a shelf location of Children's Department and a temporary location of November staff picks. What will display is the location in the Power Pack. Yep, excellent. Children's Department, because why? The temporary location is worthless. So whatever you see in the location, the shelf location in the Power Pack is going to be the shelf location in the item record. Okay, so I really hope that you have a better idea of what parts in the item record patrons are seeing when they are in the Power Pack. And let's wrap this up. So today, we've seen how item record settings can impact the patron experience, specifically when checking out, sort circulation, when placing holds, and when viewing the Power Pack. So I really hope you've got some more context for what those different item record settings and fields do from the patron perspective. Um, I do have some selected resources available through CCS sites related to what we talked about today. I will link to these in the follow-up email with the recording. For those who are interested in holds, there's a really excellent how-to page on our CCS website that kind of like breaks down each what each like checkbox setting does. So I highly recommend that page. You will see you should see the recording in the next day or two. We'll link to it in upcoming issue of CCS News as well. Additionally, we've got, you're probably used to seeing this, we've got a training evaluation form. I'll post it to the chat and it'll also be linked in the email. There's a question where you can suggest topics for future training sessions, which is so helpful for us when planning these sessions. And as always, if you find that any questions kind of come up after we've logged off today, please don't hesitate to email me directly or email help@ccslib.org. So I am going to stick around for as long as you have questions. Yeah, thanks so much. I really hope this was useful.